2 years of war have made it clear to the terrorist organization Hamas things will not be as easy as they were, as Israel has undergone a conceptual change. Standing alongside Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Vice President Vance declared that the mission is to disarm Hamas and rebuild the Gaza Strip. However, Israeli intelligence assessments indicate that in fact, Hamas is returning to rule and to mandate inside the Gaza Strip after the ceasefire. This includes tax collection and the imposition of order using brutal violence as Hamas is re-establishing its rule. It is also holding hundreds of civilians, Palestinians, in underground detention facilities, although it has said it will stop the execution of people under heavy pressure from United States President Donald Trump. And beyond that, new intelligence data shows that Hamas still holds hundreds of rockets and more than half of the tunnels. And with all of that in mind, Phase B of the ceasefire deal is already under discussion, and we'll tell you what's happening in the talks on implementing this agreement amidst Hamas's fear that Israel will implement the Lebanese model in the Gaza Strip. And in related news, assurances have been received that Turkish troops will not be part of an international stabilization force to enter the Gaza Strip. And in the northern arena, talks are continuing between Israel and the El Julani regime in Syria. However, many issues remain unresolved, and next door in Lebanon, Hezbollah is trying to recover, but the Air Force of Israel continues to take out field operatives and leaders. But there was also bad news in Israel this week. The names and the personal information of 30,000 IDF soldiers and pilots were published by Al Jazeera after someone hacked an Israeli database. And meanwhile, the High Court of Justice in The Hague ruled that Israel is obligated to cooperate with UNRWA after the court declared that there is insufficient evidence to prove that many of its employees were actually Hamas members. Welcome to Boots on the Ground. I'm your host, Yair Pinto, and this is your weekend edition where we bring you all the truth about what's happening in Israel as usual, but we also take a look at some of the items that slipped past us through this week. So just a moment before we go over the headlines, give a click, make sure to hit the like button, share, leave a comment, and make sure to subscribe to TBN Israel so that you never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. Let's begin. Israeli intelligence assessments indicate that Hamas is returning to rule and to manage the Gaza Strip after the ceasefire. This was the worst-case scenario that Israeli officials warned that it's needed to be prepared for as part of the ceasefire agreement, and now it's upon us. Hamas is already collecting taxes and operating municipal services throughout the Gaza Strip, acting like they own the place, just as Israel tried to tell everyone that will happen. However, despite this very inauspicious beginning to this process, the security echelon's recommendations to the political echelon is to move forward to Phase B in this agreement. Perhaps that is because Israel's security echelon knows that they also have some cards to play in this situation. For instance, when Hamas violated the ceasefire by attacking IDF troops in Rafah last Sunday morning, the IDF was ready with a response, launching air and naval strikes which resulted in the elimination of 5 Hamas senior commanders. Hamas now knows that Israel is continuing to take and to track their leadership and their locations, and it can hit them wherever Hamas gives the IDF a reason to respond. And the terrorist organization also fears that Israel will use the issue of disarmament as a reason to continue eliminating additional terrorists. But that's not the only problem that Hamas is dealing with right now. In discussions with officials from Arab governments in recent days, Hamas has come under enormous pressure to disarm, and we'll see if they can stand up to this pressure. Another source of pressure on Hamas is, of course, the Americans. When reports first began to surface of Hamas executing its opponents, President Trump initially seemed indifferent, but as reports persisted, he changed his tone, threatening Hamas that if they continue with this policy, which he called a violation of the ceasefire, he would give the IDF the green light to go back into the Gaza Strip and sort them out. And a report in the Wall Street Journal news portal indicated that Hamas informed the mediators that it will stop executing militia members in Gaza after it was made clear to them that they could provide Israel a pretext to renew the fighting in the Gaza Strip. And furthermore, according to reports in Saudi media portals, Hamas fears that Israel will carry out targeted killings in Gaza just the same way as it operates against Hezbollah in Lebanon. But other reports indicate that even after 2 years of war, Hamas retains a large arsenal of rockets, which it might be holding as a threat to counter the possibility of assassinations. Hamas also retains large quantities of small arms with which they can arm new recruits. And although most of its above-the-ground infrastructure was destroyed in this war, it also retains more than half of its air tunnel network. Accordingly, Hamas is delaying the release of the hostage remains to buy time in talks with the United States until convenient actors enter the Gaza Strip. The main competition is shaping the parameters of what the Gaza Strip will look like moving forward, and what's going on between Qatar and Turkey on one side and moderate states led by Egypt and Saudi Arabia on the other. In this context, it's important to remember what was previously reported, that Hamas has handpicked about half of the supposedly neutral council of technocrats that are supposed to take over the civil administration in the Gaza Strip in coordination with Egypt and with other mediators. Thus, the organization keeps a foothold in the future governments of the Gaza Strip. And in a related story, Prime Minister Netanyahu voiced strong objections to the entry of Turkish forces into the Gaza Strip during meetings this week with visiting US Vice President J.D. Vance. During his visit, Vance also met with families of hostages and captivity survivors and admitted, "It is not certain that we will succeed in bringing everybody back, the remains of the hostages that were murdered in Gaza." The response to this was that closing the circle is important for everybody. And on that note, the tight American supervision of the agreement's implementation continues, including continued airlifts of American equipment and aid shipments. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is also visiting Israel this week to keep an eye on this process. But the Americans are not the only ones trying to influence the post-war settlement in the Gaza Strip. Turkey is also attempting to inject itself into the situation, and the IHH organization, which was one of the prime sponsors of the Mavi Marmara flotilla 16 years ago that tried to break into Gaza with weapons, is amongst the groups that Turkey is actually supporting. And we'll take a look at that. We'll also take a look at the evolving situation in Israel's northern arena. Before his trip to the United Nations General Assembly, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu referred to the possibility of normalization with Syria, saying, "We are holding contacts with the Syrians there, and there is some progress, but it is still far off." And next door in Lebanon, Hezbollah is trying to recover, but the Air Force continues to keep up the pressure, eliminating one field operative after another and destroying Hezbollah's weapons and equipment. And on the media front, the Al Jazeera network continues to attack Israel as 2 investigations in a row exposed the names of soldiers and their ranks in the IDF, and also accused the IDF of war crimes in the Gaza Strip. And finally, Israel suffered a setback this week at the International Criminal Court at The Hague, which ruled that Israel bears the obligation to support the United Nations and its agencies and its aid efforts in the Gaza Strip, including UNRWA. The ruling included a dismissal of Israeli accusations that UNRWA is infiltrated by Hamas. Sources in Jerusalem said that this ruling represents another politicization of the international law, and that the process is improper, and that the court has become a tool of the General Assembly. So we have a lot to talk about today, so let's dive into the details. I'm Yair Pinto, and this is your Boots on the Ground report about what's happening in Israel after the ceasefire took into effect, and we'll see how long it holds. But the war is still going on, and today we will focus on all the items that slipped past the headlines this week, including the information about the continued battle against Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, the Shia militias in Iraq, and all the other armed groups in this region, while taking their orders from Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, which is the head of the crumbling axis of evil in the Middle East. A moment before we start, I want to call on all of you to continue and spread the truth. Share and follow us, and most importantly, do not forget to click on the subscribe button so that you remain tuned to what's happening in Israel and never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. Hamas continues to return the remains of the fallen hostages in small batches. On Tuesday evening, it transferred 2 additional coffins to the Red Cross, but on Wednesday, it handed over no remains at all. The delay in returning the remains of the fallen hostages is likely deliberate and part of a large drama emerging over which bloc of the parties in the Muslim world would dominate the Gaza Strip moving forward. And Hamas fears a situation similar to what currently exists in Lebanon, in the sense that in recent days Israel eliminated 5 key Hamas field operatives, and the concern is that its violations of the ceasefire will lead to the creation of an equation of fire from Israel. The reason Hamas is not releasing all the remains at once is because they are playing for time, for 2 reasons. First, this is what keeps it relevant. The war ended after 2 years, and it is still a significant actor. In addition, as time passes, very convenient actors for Hamas, especially Turkey and Qatar, are entering the Gaza Strip, partly under the pretense of helping Hamas look for more remains. And Hamas also announced that a delegation of organizations and the leadership headed by Muhammad Darwish met yesterday with Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan and Turkish Intelligence Chief Ibrahim Kalin in Doha, Qatar, regarding the implementation of the ceasefire agreement in the Gaza Strip and ways to transfer humanitarian aid to the Gaza Strip area. The delegation included Khaled Mashal, Zair Jabrin, Nizar Audallah, and Sami Khater. In this context, it's important to understand that there is a competition between 2 very significant camps over control of the Gaza Strip and its reconstruction. On the one hand, as noted, is a camp highlighted by the Muslim Brotherhood, Turkey, and Qatar, and on the other, moderate Muslim states highlighted by Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. Some would add the Palestinian Authority in the moderate camp, and I'm not sure about that. And let me know what you think in the comments. I want to hear what you say about all of this. But in any case, it's important to note the great significance of this week's visit to Israel by Egypt's intelligence minister. Until quite recently, there was concern in Israel and in Egypt that diplomatic relations might be facing a severe crisis. Now, Egypt and Israel share a common vision of Gaza's future and have a powerful incentive to cooperate in promoting that vision. Saudi Arabia and the UAE also share much of that same vision, but their strategy is tied to the Palestinian Authority's resumption of operations inside the Gaza Strip area. This is something that Israel is opposing. And with that having been said, Israel is also continuing its own operations in the Gaza Strip, and as noted, in the last week, it included strikes which took out 5 key Hamas field operatives, terrorists, from the area of Gaza. And sources in the Palestinian factions told the Saudi news portal Ashrak al-Awsat that Israel used a suicide UAV on Sunday and eliminated Taj el-Din El-Wihadi, the deputy commander of the Western Battalion in Jabalia, which belongs to the Northern Brigade of Hamas's military wing, which he was in an apartment near the port area west of Gaza City. The source noted that El-Wahdi is the field commander and the de facto commander of the battalion, which carried out a series of actions against Israeli forces during this war, and under his direct supervision, he planned and also executed operations against our forces. He noted that the man had been a target for a series of assassinations during the war and survived them, and was amongst those who oversaw the attack on Zikim on October 7th, an Israeli community next to the border with Gaza. Another Hamas source noted that an additional UAV fired at least 1 missile aimed at 4 militants from the leadership of the factions, and all of them were eliminated. It also struck their field commander, who served as the commander of the Nukhba unit in the Eastern Battalion of Jabalia in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip. And according to him, the 5 militants were near a beach resort in the town of El Zuwayda in the central parts of the Gaza Strip. All were residents of the Jabalia refugee camp and carried out many military missions during this war. Furthermore, Israel is seeing its worst-case scenario for a post-war order in the Gaza Strip coming into focus as Hamas is moving forcefully to re-establish its power and to control the Gaza Strip and its residents within a very short time. The steps that Hamas is taking at the civilian and at their government's level, including tax collection, operation of municipal services, taking independent actions against clans, and ruthless eliminations of its opponents. Nevertheless, the recommendation of the security echelon to the political echelon is to move forward to phase B in this agreement. And in related news, in the backdrop of President Donald Trump's warnings, the Wall Street Journal reported this week that Hamas informed the mediators that it will cease the executions of militia members in Gaza, other Palestinians, after it was made clear to it that such steps could provide Israel with a pretext to resume the fighting. And Hamas also noted that Israel might use the issue of disarmament as a pretext to carry out further strikes in the Gaza Strip area as it is acting against Hezbollah in Lebanon. Brushing off Hamas's concerns, President Trump declared this week that many of our allies in and around the Middle East have told me explicitly that they would welcome the opportunity at my request to go into Gaza with heavy forces and level Hamas if they continue to violate the agreement with us. I told those countries, and also to Israel, not yet. There is still hope that Hamas will do the right thing. If they do not, Hamas' end will be swift and brutal. And I want to thank all the countries that have called for help. I also want to thank the great and powerful country of Indonesia and its wonderful leader for all the help that they have shown and given to the Middle East and to the United States of America, according to Donald Trump. That last part is especially interesting to me, and I'm closely following the events related to Indonesia these days. So let me know in the comments section if you have any thoughts about this subject. Now moving on, the security establishment assesses that Hamas still has hundreds of rockets, some with medium range that can reach the center of the country of Israel. And in addition, the organization has more than 10,000 small arms with which to equip its new recruits. And also, although Hamas was greatly weakened during the war over the past 2 years, but it still holds more than half of the tunnels that it had when the war started. And with all of that in mind, it's also assessed that the presence of IDF forces in the Strip and the fighting led to significant damage to the readiness of the battalions of Hamas and its military wing. And according to information held by Israel, battalions against which a maneuver was carried out on a broad scale, such as the battalions of the Rafah Brigade, amongst others, are now dealing with a significant gap in munitions, having lost more than 60% of their military equipment. However, Hamas still has all it needs to carry out terrible repression against the civilian population surrounding the Gaza Strip and especially inside Gaza itself against the Palestinians. The terror organization's militants are not content with abusing Gazans, imprisoning them and carrying out executions above ground. They are also detaining them underneath the ground in detention complexes in tunnels. Those Gazans who were captured by Hamas on various accusations are held without basic conditions and are denied food, drink, and sunlight. And this was done after they were arrested secretly. Since the ceasefire came into effect, Hamas has been pursuing its opponents with increased ferocity. The main effort is led by the Shaham, or the Arrow Unit, and the Israel Hayom news portal has learned that this unit currently numbers about 1,000 armed militants, some of whom were seconded to it from the Nukhba of Hamas's military wing, also known as the Izzadin el-Qassam brigades. It has also emerged that people are recruited to the unit from Hamas's other policing mechanisms, as well as young Gazans who are not members of the organization to begin with, mainly from the Jabalia area. Their goal is to consolidate control in the streets of Gaza and eradicate internal opposition amongst other Palestinians. And during the war, Israel eliminated dozens of commanders in the Hamas internal security apparatus. But now, Hamas is making new appointments. And on Sunday, we reported that the organization recently appointed a new interior minister responsible for the policing mechanisms and the pursuit of collaborators or so-called collaborators with Israel. According to Palestinian sources, this is Taysir El-Batzh, who previously headed the police mechanisms and was wounded in an IDF strike in 2014. He received the task of pursuing the residents of the Gaza City area, and according to the reports, he's moving very fast. And here, at TBN Israel, we will continue to bring you all the truth, so share, follow us, and most importantly, make sure to subscribe to TBN Israel on YouTube. And now, I've talked a lot in today's report about the situation in the Gaza Strip. So I want to speak for just a few moments about the situation in Israel. To get right to the point, Israel needs your help, and we need it now. Nearly 2 years after the war broke out, many families are still displaced from their homes. Soldiers are still defending the homeland of Israel. Many small businesses and farms are struggling to get back in business, and millions of ordinary people are in great financial and emotional distress. Meir Panim is standing in the gap, feeding the hungry, supporting Holocaust survivors, caring for teens at risk, and also lifting up the brave men and women of the IDF. This year alone, they have served more than 2.6 million meals, supported over 100,000 IDF soldiers, delivered 500,000 care packages, and helped thousands of families rebuild their lives. But the need is still great, as around 2.6 million Israelis are living below the poverty line. That's right, and that's one Israeli out of every 4. And more than 1 million Israeli children go to bed hungry each night. This is your moment to make a difference. Every dollar provides hope, dignity, and real help to those who need it most. So visit bless-israel.org and give generously today. Again, that's bless-israel.org and give generously to the people of Israel. Let's make a difference in this land during this time of need. And now we are switching our focus to the visit to Israel by U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance. Towards the end of the U.S. Vice President's visit to Israel, a political source said that the supreme goal now is to complete Phase A of the Trump plan, and this will happen very soon. The assessment is that very soon, by Friday, we will be able to announce the return of another number of fallen hostages. In Israel, they believe in Hamas's ability to return them all the fallen hostages who remained in Gaza. And the political source also noted that Israel clarified to senior members of the Trump administration that it has no objection to the immediate start of reconstruction without delay in areas of Gaza that are south and east of what is called the Yellow Line. And according to him, this is open territory with no Hamas. This is not the same Gaza that we knew. Hamas is today mainly in the areas around Gaza City, and that is a different story. We clarified to the Americans that we will agree to reconstruction and building in those areas provided it is carried out by actors who are not anti-Israel and not hostile to the Jewish state. Hopefully such investors will be found very soon, and high-level construction there will only contribute to advancing Phase B of the Trump plan. And another issue that came in the talks with the American officials is the establishment of the emerging International Stabilization Force. The source said regarding this issue that Israel marked a clear red line. No Turkish soldiers will enter Gaza. Turkey's army will not be part of the stabilization force. The Americans signaled the agreement, and Israel is pleased with that. This is according to this report. There is progress in building the stabilization forces. And as part of his visit to Israel, Vance also met on Wednesday with families of the hostages and the survivors of captivity after 2 years in Hamas captivity, and he said that Washington will continue to act in every possible way to bring back the fallen hostages. He said, "I cannot promise that everyone will return, but we are working on it together with the other partners so that it will be done as quickly as possible. It is clear to the United States that Hamas must be removed from Gaza in order to restore security." And parallel to the Vice President's visit, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is expected to arrive in Israel on Thursday as part of the continued American oversight of the agreement's implementation. He will stay in Israel over the weekend, visiting the American headquarters in Kiryat Gat and meeting with the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Rubio's visit comes as part of the tight sequences of visits by senior American officials whose goal is to ensure that the ceasefire is maintained and that the deal with Hamas proceeds according to the American plan. In fact, this is hard to ignore the growing involvement of the United States in managing events in Israel to the point of an almost daily political and security presence. And senior officials in Washington and in Jerusalem define this as close involvement intended to ensure that the ceasefire is maintained and that the agreement in Gaza is fully implemented. And from the American perspective, it is a need to supervise the process closely and prevent a security deterioration that will undermine the recent gains in these negotiations. And now, a moment ago, you heard me mention about the American headquarters in Kiryat Gat. In case you're not sure what I'm referring to, here's the explanation. Kiryat Gat is a city in Israel, and the Americans recently established an international headquarters in Kiryat Gat in the industrial zone there, in which about 200 American soldiers are stationed alongside representatives from Jordan, the United Arab Emirates, Britain, Denmark, and Germany. Vice President Vance visited the headquarters this week, at the center of which a press conference was held in the presence of the American and British generals and under the shadow of the Israeli and the American flags. Behind the podium, large signs were placed with the inscription "Trump's 20-point plan," the American vision for Gaza that is supposed to be realized step by step. Vance was asked at noon, at the start of his meeting with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, whether Israel had become a protectorate of the United States, but the two denied it, with Netanyahu equipping that at one time they say it is our protectorate, and at another that we are theirs. On a more serious note, he concluded that Israel will decide on its own security. Vance added during his remarks, "We do not want a protectorate. We want a partnership, a strong ally. The president believes that Israel can play a positive leadership role in this region. And nevertheless, the reality on the ground is clear. What will be in this area from now on is intensive American involvement. They will not let the plan that they've worked so hard to construct fall apart. First of all, they want to see the return of all the fallen hostages to Israel. Vance said that some of the fallen are buried deep underground and it will take time to locate all of them, adding that we must exercise patience. He also spoke of a phenomenon, in his word, whereby the Western media reports hysterically on every incident or violation in order to present it as a failure of this agreement. But alongside the difficulties, he clarified that he's optimistic and that there is a tremendous effort to preserve this ceasefire agreement. In fact, the Americans are already working on the second phase of this deal, which includes establishing a military stabilization force that will sit physically in the Gaza Strip and whose role will be to ensure that Hamas disarms and that Gaza is demilitarized, but also that Israel does not act militarily and violate the ceasefire. After all, Israel will not bomb Gaza when there are foreign soldiers in Gaza. And on the other hand, the stabilization force will be counterweight to Hamas and will give the population, the Palestinians in Gaza, the sense that there is someone that is protecting them. In parallel with the Americans, and that are sitting in a civil control mechanism over Gaza, the intention is a technocratic Palestinian government which will be composed of Palestinian and of also international experts. However, the Kan News Israeli media portal reported this week that Hamas will be involved in choosing half of this government, so it is clear to everybody that the terrorist organization will not lose its control in Gaza if it picks the leadership. In Israel, they are quick to say that they are the ones who will approve the identity of all the government members, and if it is found that they are Hamas people, they will be disqualified. And official political sources also declared, "We will not allow Hamas to take part in governing Gaza," exactly as written in this agreement. Time will tell whether Hamas will indeed give up its control, but Vance was more forceful and clarified that if Hamas does not disarm, it will be destroyed. We also extend a hand to Hamas militants and said that they would receive amnesty if they act in accordance with this agreement. And here at TBN Israel, we will continue to bring you all the truth about what's happening on the ground. It's thanks to you that we can keep doing what we're doing, reporting every day from the ground. But if you want to help us, help the algorithm spread this content to more people, hit the like button, leave a comment, share this video, and make sure to subscribe to TBN Israel YouTube channel. We need your help because this is a spiritual war. So share and pray. Now, we are switching our focus to the media front. So the Qatari-based media portal, Al Jazeera, aired this week, over 2 days ago, an investigative program that focused on the specific names and ranks of IDF soldiers and encountered legal moves against them. In the first program, the names and the ranks of IDF soldiers from the 401st Armored Brigade were exposed. In the second program, the channel revisited an old list of Air Force personnel and likewise accused them of war crimes. The program, broadcast in Arabic and called Makafi Azam, translated into Hebrew, "What is hidden is greater," is one of the channel's most popular investigative programs. It is hosted by the Qatari journalist Tamir El-Mashal, known for his critical and caustic positions towards Israel. El-Mashal was previously involved in producing propaganda materials on behalf of Hamas and cooperated in distributing them. And in the first episode that was aired this week, it was claimed as part of a joint effort by El-Mashal and the Hind Kharaj Foundation, which specializes in pursuing IDF soldiers and officers, that soldiers from the 401st Brigade were involved in illegal actions during the fighting in the Gaza Strip. And yesterday, another part of the report was broadcasted, in which an old document was revised that, according to the channel, includes about 30,000 names of pilots, technicians, and Israeli soldiers who allegedly took part in the fighting in the Gaza Strip. And according to the program, the investigation should be advanced with officials at the International Criminal Court in The Hague. And Israel's security establishment is monitoring the publications on Al Jazeera, but at this stage, no response has been given. Past publications in Israeli media against Mashal drew criticism from him, indicating that he attributes great importance to what is being said about him. To explain, Al Jazeera is based in Qatar, and it is banned in several other Arab countries in the Middle East for the very excellent reason that it is perceived as a media arm of the Muslim Brotherhood, which is classified as a terrorist organization in Egypt, in Saudi Arabia, and in the United Arab Emirates. The Palestinian Authority has also banned Al Jazeera, accusing it of supporting Hamas. What is beyond dispute is that Al Jazeera has several goals with making Israel look bad at the top of their list. Supporting Hamas is very possible in the second and also very important goal of Al Jazeera, but recently this has been tempered by the desire not to directly antagonize President Donald Trump. Another major priority of Al Jazeera is to continue backing terror under a guise that can sell in the West, as in this case, freedom of the press. And finally, Al Jazeera wants to rack up ratings, views, and also income, just like any other business. These so-called investigative reports achieve all of those goals at once. And here at TBN Israel, we will continue to bring you all the truth, so make sure to hit the subscribe button so that you never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. And now, we are shifting our focus to another arena where Israel is under attack, and I'm talking about the International Court of Justice in The Hague. On Wednesday, the court published an advisory opinion regarding Israel's obligations to ensure the delivery of humanitarian aid to Palestinian residents in Gaza and in Judea and Samaria. The court determined that Israel bears the duty to ensure the provision of the basic needs of the civilian population in Gaza. A panel of 11 judges added that Israel must support the aid efforts of the United Nations and its agencies in the Gaza Strip, including UNRWA, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian Refugees in the Near East. The agency is heavily infiltrated by Hamas and has been documented to be working closely with the terrorist organization, but the court didn't seem to think that that should matter at all. The judges ruled that Israel did not substantiate its claims that a significant number of UNRWA employees are members of the Hamas terrorist organization. It was further written that even if it is possible that a number of the organization's personnel acted contrary to its principles, it is actively necessary in the arena of the Gaza Strip, and no alternative was presented to the service that it provides. The proceedings began even before the signing of the current ceasefire agreement in the Gaza Strip, and it concerns Israel's decision to ban UNRWA's activity in the territory of Gaza. The hearing was born following the request of the United Nations General Assembly from December 2024, which asked the court to determine Israel's obligations to ensure and assist in the delivery of essentials for the survival of the Palestinian population in Gaza. Although an advisory opinion is not legally binding, it is considered to carry significant legal and political weight, and UN officials define it as a step that may affect the work of the entire organization worldwide. Now, to explain, Israel banned UNRWA's activities last January after it claimed that some of the organization's employees collaborated with Hamas and that the agency's facilities were used by the terrorist organization for terror purposes. UNRWA denied the claims, of course, and following the ban, aid shipments to the Gaza Strip were halted for 3 months, causing severe shortages of food and medicine. Only after international pressure did Israel agree to allow partial aid entry via a private entity, the Gaza Humanitarian Fund, GHF, supported by the United States. The move drew sharp criticism from international actors, and in certain parts of the Gaza Strip, reports emerged last summer of a famine and famine-like conditions. Israel, for its part, claimed that there is no actual shortage of food and that Hamas is the one confiscating goods and preventing the distribution to the population. Testimonies of hostages released from the Gaza Strip supported this claim, testifying that while they were starved, their guards had all the food that they needed. And Israel chose not to participate in the court's hearings held in April, claiming that this is a political-based process. Instead, it submitted to the court a 38-page document with its official position, in which it was written that the proceedings completely ignored Hamas's conduct and its use of civilian population as human shields, and that the General Assembly demands do not take into account the security context in which Israel operates. And during the hearing, Palestine's ambassador to the Netherlands, Amar Hijazi, claimed that Israel is starving, killing, and sterilizing the Palestinians while attacking and preventing the operation of the humanitarian organizations that are trying to save lives. Israeli officials defined the publication of the opinion as a politicalization of legal proceedings against Israel within United Nations institutions. According to them, in parallel to the advisory opinion on UNRWA, 4 separate proceedings are being conducted against Israel in the court, in addition to the genocide proceedings that are being conducted by South Africa. And here, at TBN Israel, we will continue to bring you all the truth and share and tell you what's happening on the ground so that you will know how to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. On Wednesday morning, the IDF eliminated Issa Ahmed Karbala, a platoon commander in Hezbollah's Radwan forces that is active in the Ain Kana area in Lebanon. The terrorist, according to the IDF, was involved in weapons transfers in Lebanon and advanced terror schemes against the State of Israel. His actions constituted a violation of the understandings between Israel and Lebanon. This is a fairly typical example of what we're seeing along Israel's northern border these days. In recent days, the IDF has identified attempts by Hezbollah to act and to rebuild its capabilities in Lebanon, and this is the reason for the increase in the scope of the IDF's activities in southern Lebanon and in the Bekaa Valley. In the IDF spokesperson's statement referring to the incident, it was said, amongst other things, that the IDF will continue to act in order to remove any threat to the state of Israel. Another thing that will continue is that TBN Israel and Boots on the Ground will continue to report about everything that's happening here in Israel, so that you will know how to share the truth. We call on you to be ambassadors of the truth. Share, share, and share. And the most important thing that you can do in this situation is pray for the peace of Jerusalem. But make it personal. Pray for the soldiers that are defending us. Pray for the hostages that are trying to get used to normal life in Israel. Pray for all the innocent lives that are affected by these terrorist regimes. Pray for wisdom to our leaders. And keep praying for the peace of Jerusalem.
Hello, this is Mati here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online at tbn.org/Israel. Thank you.